A little boy was once given a slingshot for his birthday. He loved that slingshot. He practiced every day aiming at many different objects. Well, during the summer, he and his sister would spend a lot of time at their grandmother's farm. One day he eyed his grandmother's pet duck. On impulse, he took his slingshot, aimed it, and then hit the duck with a stone. The duck unfortunately died. He had killed it. Then he panicked. What did he do? He knew that that was his grandmother's pet duck, and a voice in his head was saying, "Now she'll never forgive you for what you did." So, because he panicked, he then took the bird and hid it in the woodpile. When he looked up, there was his sister, and she had seen everything. After lunch, his grandmother asked Sally to do the dishes. Well, Sally then said, "Well, Johnny said that he wanted to do the dishes. Didn't you, Johnny?" And then she whispered, "Remember the duck." Johnny did the dishes. Over the next few days, Johnny did a lot of dishes, and he made Sally's bed, and he did all of Sally's chores, and he kept hearing, "Remember the duck." Finally, Johnny couldn't take the guilt anymore, and he came running to his grandmother to apologize and ask her to forgive him. Well, Grandma said to Johnny, "I saw you from the window when you hit the duck, and I knew that you didn't mean to kill the duck, and I saw you hide him in the woodpile. I knew that you felt horrible, and I forgave you from the window. But I didn't know how long you would let your sister hold the guilt over your head until finally you would come to me to apologize." Welcome to the Word for 2022. Today we're going to be talking about forgiveness and Psalm 32. We have all sinned. We've all lied at one time or stolen something, broken God's laws. We are all guilty. And Satan, he will always use our sin against us. He will always remind us, threaten us, and he will blackmail us. He will tell us that we are unforgivable, unlovable, and unredeemable. In 2 Samuel chapter 11, David committed sin with Bathsheba. In 2 Samuel 12, the prophet Nathan came to David and told him a story about injustice. And then he pointed to David and he said, "You are the man." From that confrontation, David then wrote Psalm 51. In that psalm, David confessed his sin, his guilt, and his shame. Confession is simply agreeing with God. It's not rationalizing. It's not blaming others or playing the victim, but rather agreeing with God that you have sinned, that you are responsible, that you are guilty, and that you are in need of repentance. David did just that. He repented. And now in Psalm 32, this was written after Psalm 51, David, he's talking about forgiveness. He speaks of the blessing of being forgiven, and he speaks about what happens when you don't confess your sin, and he talks about what happens when you do confess your sin. David then, in this psalm, encourages others not to hold on to their sin and their guilt, but rather to confess before the Lord and experience God's blessings of forgiveness. Guilt is a feeling that God uses in our life to tell us that there is something wrong. There's something that we need to deal with. There's something that we need to fix. It's to get our attention. Very much like that indicator light on your car's dashboard when it comes on telling you that there's a problem and you need to take care of it. Now, we can ignore it, or we can even put a piece of black tape over it, but the problem doesn't go away. In fact, it usually always gets worse. Psalm 32 is a call to not ignore guilt caused by sin, but to confess it before the Lord and then receive God's forgiveness. David talks about the past, the present, and the future, and he wants us to learn the lesson that he dealt with. Thank you for joining the Word for 2022.